What does a Terminator and an iron golem have in common? Quite a lot, actually. They're both powerful constructs, lethal. They're unwavering in carrying out their orders. They can't be bribed or sweet-talked. They don't tire. They mercilessly pursue their target. And they're not easy to damage at all. And golems are everywhere. Maybe not at the local grocery store, but just about any fantasy setting is very likely to have some form of golem. And iron golems are not quite as common as other types, but they exist basically as the magic equivalent of a robot. Although sometimes they can be more like a possessed suit of armor. Either way, just how screwed would you be if you had to face one of these? If you're looking for ideas for your novel, RPG campaign, or other writing, this may also interest you. Campfire, the sponsor of this video. Campfire Blaze is a writing software that offers plenty of tools to help your creative work. You can easily organize all your information about characters, their relationships, as well as the emotional and physical changes in their arc. And there are nested timelines to keep an overview of events whenever your creation is taking on a life of its own and is starting to overwhelm you. You can create maps and place images, stats, references, etc. The neat thing is, as you add new info, you can make it automatically appear in your character profiles to keep track of the places and scenes they show up in. You can customize it by picking exactly the modules that you need. Payment is flexible too. You can either go for a monthly or annual subscription, or you can pay a one-time fee to keep it permanently. It has a free trial and 30-day money-back guarantee. If you want to enhance your writing, check it out. The link to Campfire Blaze is in the description below. If we go by their description in Dungeons & Dragons, they are rather imposing, to say the least. 3.7 meters or 12 feet tall, with a weight of 2,300 kilograms or 5,000 pounds. In other words, they weigh as much as an average full-sized pickup truck. And they also have a number of resistances and immunities. They're immune to any physical attacks other than with adamantine or magical weapons. They have magic resistance, they have fire resistance, etc. Poison, obviously, forget about it. They're not living organisms. They can't be intimidated or charmed or anything like that. So if one of them stumbled through a dimensional portal and ended up in real-life history or even modern times, what would you do to deal with them? Just grab one of these and start hammering away? You know, they're sort of walking armor, right? Well, not quite. In a lot of ways, it would be quite a bit worse than a possessed armor. If you think about it, armor can't be too thick because it can't be so heavy that you can't reasonably move in it. And the plates also can't be so heavy that they restrict movement. You need to be able, as a person wearing a suit of armor, you need to be able to, flex your limbs, move around, not get exhausted immediately. So historical armor was not terribly heavy and also not extremely thick. In the 16th century, they made breastplates a little thicker to deal with early firearms, but generally that's a concern. With a golem, it's powered by magic. So there's theoretically no real limit to how heavy it can be and how much it can haul around. Of course, that depends on the magic system and what limits you put on it, if any. But either way, so the first question is, are they hollow or solid? That makes quite a lot of difference. So going by the weight, I found some statues which are apparently made of solid cast iron, which are 88.5 inches tall or 2.25 meters, and they weigh 635 kilograms or 1,400 pounds with the pedestal included. So if we scaled it up to 3.7 meters, the weight would be about 1,044 kilograms. still not the 2,300 that this behemoth is supposed to weigh. Now, of course, these iron golems are built a little bit differently. They're a lot wider and bulkier than those statues, so that seems about right. We can also estimate going by density. The human body is pretty close to the density of water because, well, we are mostly water, and steel has 8 times the density of water. I'm assuming iron is about the same. So if we took a 180 centimeter tall human weighing 80 kilograms, that times 8, so the weight of that as a solid iron statue would be 640 kilograms, and the golem is twice as tall, so we'd be looking at 1,200 something kilograms. And again, this is even more than that, which makes sense because of the additional bulk. So it seems like these golems are not hollow, but made of solid iron, which makes everything a lot worse because that means it's way more resistant to any kind of attack. When we're looking at armor plates, there is a limit to the maximum thickness that we can get away with. We're generally talking millimeters. In this case, if this golem is solid, it could be like about a meter thick, basically, if we're looking at the torso. And that thickness is pretty freaking significant. There's a video on YouTube showing that it takes 17 Hershey chocolate bars to stop a 9mm. That's a lot of chocolate, but hey, it's just chocolate. So imagine that being iron plates stacked together. At the same time, if we look at it logically, there's no way a solid iron golem could move, because if it's all solid iron, it can't flex, so it wouldn't be able to move its limbs. So there needs to be something. There need to be joints, or it needs to be at least partially hollow, something like that, unless the magic is so powerful that it literally warps the material with the movements, which would be pretty insane. At that point, you're dealing with iron clay face, essentially. Then it would even be able to shapeshift, and that would be a whole different dimension of problems. Think T1000, basically. So even though the weight seems to suggest that it's solid, I'm more inclined to treat it as basically a form of power armor, just with very thick plates of iron. So what could even hurt this thing? Fire resistance seems plausible, considering that the melting point of iron, depending on the type, is between 1150 and 1600 degrees Celsius, or between 2100 and 2900 Fahrenheit. A blowtorch can reach between 13 and 1400 Celsius, which is enough, but you have a pretty short flame to work with, and the thing is not going to just let you stand there and try to burn through it. An oxyacetylene torch can go well over 3000 degrees, so it would start to melt a lot more quickly than the blowtorch would, but either way, you're not really going to be able to just stand there and hold it to it and not expect any resistance. The immunity against anything other than adamantine or magic weapons in D&D wouldn't make sense in real life, because that's just based on magic. At the same time, the entire thing wouldn't make sense because it requires magic to be created and to operate. So I'm just gonna ignore the resistance aspect to it, because anything can be damaged with enough force involved. Here's a solid block of aluminum that was hit by a bit of plastic in space at high velocity. So if you accelerate something high enough, it will damage another material, even if the material in and of itself is softer. So even though a lump of iron or steel by itself wouldn't be able to harm such a construct, if it traveled at supersonic speed, chances are it would do something. Of course, humans can swing weapons at supersonic speeds. So if this was all you had, just how screwed would you be? Very. Now, depending on the design of the golem, for example, if you look at the ones in Elder Scrolls Arena, they have pretty skinny looking upper arms and legs and joints. So in that case, you might be able to attack those weak areas. So if you think about it mechanically, as said, those limbs have to be able to move one way or another. So just like with armor worn by humans, this is a potential weak spot. You know, any part that needs to bend and flex and move around, if you strike that, for one, it's not going to be as solid as the torso, and also if you manage to dent it, it may not function properly anymore. You typically have plates sliding over top of each other to allow this sort of flexibility. And so if there's a significant dent in one, it may not fit under the other plate anymore, and it may be stuck in that position. So if the movement is largely mechanical in nature, aside from being powered by magic, this would probably be the best bet. Go for the joints. In the arms and the legs, you probably wouldn't be able to destroy the thing, but at least you could probably disable it and make it unable to move around, and then basically you can just pile a bunch of rocks on it if it's just lying on the ground unable to move. The question is, would you be able to do that with handheld weapons, considering the enormous mass, which suggests at least very thick iron plates? Probably not. Now, strikes from horseback would have been a lot more effective because you're adding the velocity of the galloping horse to the velocity of your swing. So it hits significantly harder. With a mace or a flail, something like that, at full gallop, striking at an iron golem, could he do enough damage? Maybe. If you had to go with melee weapons, that would definitely be the best bet. On horseback, charging at the thing and swinging as hard as possible and hoping for the best. Of course, nowadays we have far more potent weaponry available, even in handheld form, like the Barrett M82 anti-material rifle chambered in 50 BMG, which is able to pierce a 23mm or 0.9 inch hardened steel plate at 200 meters. At 200 meters, it still impacts with a kinetic energy of about 15,000 joules. For comparison, the medieval crossbow I've tested had an energy of between 40 and 50 joules. How thick would a block of iron have to be in order to compare to 23mm of hardened steel? I have no idea. However, there's a video by Kentucky Ballistics showing various calibers tested on a 45-pound cast iron barbell plate. And it resisted anything up to and including 44 Magnum. That's a muzzle velocity of about 1,700 joules, which of course drops with distance, but let's just assume maybe somewhere around 1,500 joules. So this plate can withstand that much. Would an iron golem have about this kind of thickness? Maybe. Going by its weight, it might be even more. So in order to be safe, should we assume something like 2,000 joules required? Now, of course, kinetic energy is not the only thing. There's also momentum. You can have tremendous kinetic energy. In the case of 5.56, for example, that's a tiny bullet, but it travels at extreme velocity and thereby carries a lot of kinetic energy. So it punches holes clean through material. Where on the other hand, if you imagine a cannonball, which is way larger and heavier, doesn't travel anywhere near as fast, but it's going to deliver a lot of momentum to the target, knock it down, push it around, etc., dent it rather than punching hole through, things like that. So you always have to keep that in mind, of course. Even if it doesn't go through the entire thing, depending on the actual thickness of the iron, it would still punch such a crater into it that it would definitely limit its mobility. So several shots from 50 BMG would definitely tear an iron golem apart. I think steel core ammo like 7.62x39 or 7.62x54R should probably be effective in damaging and disabling an iron golem. What did they have back in history that could generate this sort of kinetic energy? Well, I found a research article about a Roman carro ballista, looked something like this, which apparently with a 195-gram lead ball achieved 689 joules at a distance of 171 meters. So the closer you are, the more energy you're going to have, of course. A bolt with the same mass at 178 meter range achieved 772 joules. So that's quite good. That's definitely powerful. Enough to take down an iron golem? Probably not, I would guess. Of course, it depends on the size of the ballista. A larger one may hit harder. I found a heated discussion on Historum.com where people talked about trebuchets and the kinetic energy. And it seems that based on tests, there was one that slung a 13 kilogram ball with 15,000 joules of kinetic energy, and another one that launched a 26 kilogram ball with 33,000 joules. Take all these numbers with a grain of salt, by the way. I'm just telling you what I found. I'm by no means an expert on this, and I always sucked at physics in school. So I'm just going to link what I found down below. That is definitely enough, no doubt about it. I mean, if you can raise castle walls, you can definitely squash an iron golem. The only problem is, how do you hit that thing? Because a trebuchet is designed to hit a large target, obviously. You don't have the pinpoint accuracy, so it would probably be very difficult to hit something the size of an iron golem, and you would have to do it at quite a distance because, you know, it goes in an arc. You can't aim at something that's 10 or 20 meters away, I think. I'm not an expert on artillery, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that would not work. Now, the earliest known depiction of a cannon in medieval Europe is this one right here from 1326, and the Italian scholar Petrarch in 1350 said that basically cannons were common and familiar on the battlefield. I found an article stating that the kinetic energy at the muzzle of a medieval cannon would be around 50,000 joules, and I've seen even higher estimates. So if that's true, then a cannon would definitely obliterate an iron golem. If you have one, that's what you need to use. So what if you don't have powerful enough firearms and your handheld weapon attacks don't do enough to the thing? Well, it's time to use trickery, I suppose. I think the best alternative here would be some form of trap. Let's say you have a pit prepared, cover it with twigs and whatever, and you lure the golem onto it, it breaks through, falls into the pit, you pile rocks on it or what have you, or, you know, perhaps you could prepare a mud pit and hope that all the mud gets into, you know, all the nooks and crannies and jams up the joints and prevents mechanical movement, and you're done. But even if it doesn't, if the pit is deep enough, it falls in, you pile boulders on it or whatever, I think you're done at that point. I don't think you have to worry about it anymore. In other words, if you give Rambo enough time to prepare, he could probably beat an iron golem. He would probably be able to get it into a swinging log trap or a pit or something like that. And that's pretty sure it's your best choice. I mean, in that case, you're also out of the reach of the thing, which I'm assuming hits pretty hard. In short, how would you fight an iron golem? Ideally, you wouldn't. Ideally, you would not fight it directly, but you would shoot at it from a distance, you would lure it into a trap, something like that. It would be a lot safer and more effective. Yeah, that was a long video, but I hope you found it entertaining. Thanks for watching and have a good one.